into the latest version of ESPN FC Live. We are with you Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always talking about the biggest topics from the football world. Every Tuesday, I have the pleasure of being joined by Janusz Michallik. My name is Kay Murray. Let's get started, Janusz, because the clock is ticking. We're almost at the end of the Premier League season. We're in the thick of a title race as well between Arsenal and Manchester City. What were your biggest takeaways from the North London derby if we focus on Arsenal first?
Well, the resilience of Arsenal that they continue to show in comparison to last season. Obviously, there's progress. No denying that they're learning how to be champions, as we've said, because that takes a little bit of doing, right? I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Liverpool, doesn't it? That season 18-19, where, they came so close. They could have been easily champions and nobody would have asked any questions. They didn't, but they showed that hunger and they eventually have done it. I feel that Arsenal can still do it right now. City, obviously, given the schedule, probably are still a little bit favorites. But if Arsenal win it this year, Kay, I don't think there could be any doubt that they absolutely deserve it.
Yeah, there's been a feeling actually among some of the pundits on FC on their main show as well, Janusz, of the guys saying that they could see both of them winning out. And obviously that would go City's way then. But as you say, this Arsenal side's so strong, it's hard to bet against them. But what we are going to do is look at where they would be most likely to drop points. So what we've got remaining is Bournemouth, Manchester United and Everton. I think I know where you're going to say.
Well, I mean, there's two hotspots for each team, but I thought the North London derby may be the one for Arsenal, right? Because it was so important for Spurs, obviously, in their fight for the Champions League, a home game, and we saw the nervousness after Raya has made that mistake. It was a little bit closer than it seemed to me. Spurs played a good game, but I just thought it was a perfect, almost perfect tactics from Arteta and Arsenal. So Manchester United away, you never know what you're going to get, but what we've seen, what Manchester United were capable of doing against Liverpool, right? I mean, it's just a different way of preparing for a game when you play a big team. So I suppose that's possible. Pep Guardiola obviously doesn't like to travel to this new stadium. Hasn't won there. I don't think they've scored a goal. So that's another one. Other than that, it would be a massive, massive surprise if they drop points elsewhere. Which of course can happen. City are favorites, but look, for me, Arsenal are the best team in the Premier League. They play the best football, no doubt about that. Most complete in many ways, and we're used to saying that about Manchester City. You look at possession, they're as good as Manchester City. Combination play, as good if not better. Ability to get behind, which is a trait of Manchester City. I think Arsenal are much better than Manchester City this season in that. Set pieces, we all know about the corners, 16. It's superb. Look, again, I think that, look, I think they can win it now. They're the best team for me this season because Manchester City has dropped off a little bit. So I want to give credit to Manchester City if they do win it, because that's not as good a team as they were. They just have the know-how right now and confidence in terms of how to deal with these last few weeks of the season.
What about those nervy final moments though in the North London derby? Which way did you look at that, Janusz?
I only looked at that in terms of how they survived that, because it wasn't going anywhere. At 3-0 is done and dusted. Here, look, we can dissect every game like that, right? Kulusevski, that for me was a penalty. 15, 20 seconds later, Arsenal go the other way and score 3-0. The game could have changed. Would have liked to seen that, how they react to that. Would have been much, much closer. In the end, I think they shot themselves in the foot, but they survived. And that tells me about character, and it tells me about the learning process. It tells me about the maturity of that team. So I didn't make too much of it.
So let's delve in on City's schedule, and you've half touched on it. Wolves, Fulham, Spurs and West Ham. You've mentioned Spurs and the new stadium, and obviously that is what does stand out when you look at this remaining schedule. Does that play on your mind, knowing that that's a problem for you?
You think it does, but I think, for those players, as it gets a little bit closer, they'll understand. Who knows by then what this may or may not mean for Spurs, right? Because that's a couple games away. in terms of their fight for the top four, which I believe that's going to be the case. And I don't think Villa's given that away, because by the sounds of it, I don't think the fifth team makes it in the Premier League. So that may be a massive disappointment for Spurs. They'll get out for Manchester City, of course. They will want to cause a surprise. But I think if you go in blow for blow, and in that game, we're in the same situation as we are right now, Arsenal being ahead by 1 point, I think City will take care of Spurs. So it may go down to the last game.
Yeah, it may do, and that would be brilliant for all of us. City haven't lost in the Premier League since December 6th to Aston Villa. Do you get to a point in league play, obviously we're talking about here, where you forget what it's like to lose?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, these players have been here and they've been down that road. That's why it's so difficult to assess. I mean, it almost is going to be interesting how people assess this after the season. Let's just assume that the Manchester City wins it by a whisker, right? I mean, we're going to be talking about, I'm sure you're going to be asking me a question, have they choked? And I dare anybody to say that they've choked, because it's impossible. I mean, this is a special Manchester City team, even though not as good. I mean, you do everything possible to stay until the last moment. Last season, you could see it coming, right? Because it was decided a little bit earlier. We've all talked about the fact that Arsenal have not met Manchester City until the second half of the season, remember? So we waited for that. When that happened, they lost both games. I think they lost the third game as well in one of the cups as well. And we just knew it. They're not mature enough. They're not there just yet. They're missing a player or two. Well, guess what? I don't want to say all the success of that was down to one player, but they certainly answered that. Declan Rice was that missing piece, and we know how wonderful he was. For me, I mean, an incredible player that's changed this team. Obviously in the center of the pitch, his character, ability to play on both sides of the ball, ability to deliver these wonderful set pieces, delivers a goal here and there. So you could see where Mikel Arteta is going from year to year. And there will come a time where I think that's going to come good. If not this year, next year. But certainly you're not going to hear from me when it doesn't happen that this is a choke. This is just two wonderful teams. That's going to be question of 1 point separating the two. I suppose if you had to look at something, is as good as this team is in scoring, the best in the league, and defending and all of that. I mean, if you look at the 5 losses, if I get it right, I mean, in all those 5 losses, Arsenal did not score a goal, which it's unusual. I don't know how to explain that, but they haven't. The draws are significant, but look at the draws. I mean, it's Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Spurs, and Fulham. I mean, you're drawing against some pretty good teams right there. So I don't know if you can put it down to that. More so in those losses where they were unable to score, which is not an issue for Arsenal.
So if City do go on to win it, will this club, this team, obviously it'll be 4 straight, go down as the best in Premier League history?
You're going to have to say that, and you're going to get an argument. I'm going to get an argument from everybody, because I do remember some wonderful Liverpool teams of the past, Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United. So, I mean, you can dissect the way they played and who was better and the times, and but at the end of the day, I think if you look at the last decade, it's similar to that of Manchester United or Liverpool, right? I mean, what would this be, like 8th in this decade? And obviously just the fact that they won 4 Premier League titles straight, which nobody else has done it. So based on just these facts, because we're here for just a few minutes, that's probably a good show. Although I don't know if you come to a different conclusion, right? To each his own, what you like in the way the team plays. But obviously under Pep Guardiola, 8 wins in this decade and 4 straight in a wonderful, wonderful way. Be hard pressed to go against the facts. You have to say yes.
Okay, if we're to pick out, we go back to Arsenal here, if we're to pick out one thing for Arsenal that's impressed you most this season, it can be a player, it can be something to do with the mentality, it can be something to do with the style. What's the one thing you would choose?
Well, I mean, I think I've pointed, of all the things that I've pointed out, I think, they can win it every which way. We often talk about this plan A and plan B. I don't often, even though I pose it sometimes, I don't know how to differentiate that, right? Because I think great teams have nuance. There's plan A, but like I look at Manchester City, and it feels to me more so in the last few seasons that there's just one way. They take the ball and that they want to break you down. 99% of the time it works, and sometimes it doesn't. It's not their fault. I think what I saw in that game against Spurs, though, right, the conscious effort for Mikel Arteta to say, you have the ball. We understand what this means. This is North London derby. It's more than a game. Arsenal very much take control of every game they play, but in this one, they didn't. They set back, they counter. They're very good in that. The counter is very direct. It doesn't take a lot of time, and you saw the results from that, even though a couple goals were in, on set pieces as well, but they were so dangerous on the break as well. And I like that. I think, as I've said, they've developed a way of beating teams in many different ways where it feels that Manchester City, it feels to me it's the same way over and over again.
Just going to Arsenal now, like it feels as though obviously that window's getting smaller. We know it's not down to them if they're to win it this year. They can do what they need to do, but obviously if City win out, then that's that. Is there a way that you can go again? Or is there do you see this Arteta Arsenal side winning the title at some point? Or can that really deflate you? Like, what more do we have to do? We do everything we can and we still get beaten. That's it.
No chance. Look at Manchester City. Even though they're winning everything, they somehow Pep Guardiola finds a way to motivate. Mikel Arteta obviously came from that system, understands it, puts his own tweaks. But I think in terms of motivation from the manager, I think they're going to be even more motivated. And you have to imagine, and we don't know what's going to happen in a transfer window. But again, I do have a feeling that for Manchester City, obviously a little bit less motivation. I think they're going to lose one or two key players. You look at Manchester City after so much that they've accomplished right now. There's going to be, again, I don't foresee them going back to Manchester City from 2 years ago. There is a little bit of a rebuild. Say Bernardo Silva leaves again, it's not going to be easy to replace these players. I know they've done it, David Silva and Gundogan, but it doesn't feel the same. I think this team is hungry. I think that Arsenal is going to be even more motivated. And now imagine now, because they're squad is thin. I mean, they've been lucky. I don't want to say lucky because maybe their medical department is better than everybody else because they have a smaller squad that they use in all the games, and I don't think they've had as many injuries. So I want to give them credit for that. But they'll get another player or two, and they're going to be as hungry as ever. And I think that next season, regardless of what happens now, even if they win it, they're going to feel like we are the favorites going into the season. I'd be surprised that they won't be, because I think they'll add another player or two or three. And in my eyes, right now, we don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, City could get two or three great players, and the rest is history. But in my eyes, Arsenal will be favorites to win in next season. They weren't this year.
So, but if you were to draw some parallels and you look at Liverpool under the Klopp era and you think they've come so close, but they only won one Premier League in that time, could you draw those parallels there?
Yeah, but I mean, it's okay to win one. I mean, Arsenal would. I think they'd be happy with one, and then you hope that you can build from then. You don't know if Arsenal is going to be the same. But right now, I think if you Arsenal, it's hard to look at your team and thinking, well, in order for us to feel, or in order for the pundits like us to make us feel legitimate, Mikel Arteta is going to be thinking, I got to win this 2 or 3 or 4 times. I mean, first things first, win it for the first time. I mean, if he never wins it, that's a whole other story. That's an opportunity missed. But no, I don't. Not at this point. I wouldn't look at Arteta and Arsenal in the same way I look at Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp.
Now, obviously, our viewers just see you and I, Janusz, but there's a whole team behind this, and they can talk to us while we're on this broadcast. And they have just echoed a sentiment that's been going on in here all this time you've been talking today, saying it seems that you're more upbeat over Arsenal and City. And that's what's standing out to me today as well, because you're usually picking City always, and that too, it feels that's going to do it for you. But it does feel, and you're even saying there's such a great team, that you are more upbeat about Arsenal right now than City.
No, I just think I'm giving them credit when it's due. I've picked Manchester City last season and this season, I think, to win it. I'm sticking with it because at this stage, looking at the schedule, I still feel, they've been there, right? Last season, how many games in hand they had, right? It's one of the few teams where you can't say, well, you still have to win the games in hand. They've proven it, right? And it's not, it's only one that's left. So as long as that stands, I have to say Manchester City, but I'll be very happy if Arsenal win it, because as I said, If they do, they absolutely deserve it. There's zero doubt. I mean, there's no statistic that someone can throw at me at the end of it if Arsenal edges it to say they were lucky or anything like that. How? It's impossible. I mean, big disappointment, obviously, after losing the game against Villa. They could have folded. Big disappointment against Bayern Munich, a team that historically they haven't done well. They were disappointed, and they bounced again in a massive match, right? I mean, there was one in between there, but in a game against Spurs. So it just tells me that hunger, the maturity, the know-how, and the entire Premier League has been a tremendous success. And again, if you look at statistically in everything, I mean, they top Manchester City with that one experience, that last moment, that little bit of pressure where, somewhere earlier in the season, they've lost some of these games that, comes back to bite you. Of course, you never know when that moment was and what it was that cost you. At the end of the day, yeah, you can look at it. And I've mentioned before, just to repeat it, they've lost more games than City, 5 games without scoring. And I suppose you look at those games because the draws against some pretty good teams.